Welcome to Staples.
Staples guy, I have my own business, so I wear lots of hats. Now I'm wearing my office manager hat because I need supplies.
Well, Staples has everything you need.
Now I'm putting on my CFO hat because I can't overspend.
And you won't. Right now, save up to $150 on HP laptops and desktops.
All my hats and I would like to thank you.
They are welcome.
Staples. Everything you need for business at great prices. And now save up to $150 on HP laptops and desktops. Ends 3/18/17. See store or staples.com for details. Restrictions may apply.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Life's Twist Show with your hosts, Terry Robinson, Lance Conley, and Eric Harrison.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Life Twist Show. My name is Eric Harrison, and I am one of the three hosts that will be talking about our subject tonight. And basically what happened is last week we had such a strong subject, which was sex scandals in college sports. And we kind of brought up the situation at Baylor. We brought up the situation with Duke lacrosse. We brought up Louisville. We brought up all types of different scandals that have went on in college sports over the last several years that have been blockbusters. And also we kind of talked about how the culture on some college campuses, breeds some of this behavior. We also talk about how the authorities on these campuses kind of allow these things, and just some of the psychological effects and some of the things that actually bring on a lot of this stuff over the years. So then we thought about it, and we thought that, hey, you know what? One thing that we've done that most people do at times is that we've kind of forgotten the women's perspective in this thing. And what we have done is we've continued that show. So this is part 2 of that show, but instead of calling it part 2, I call it the women's perspective, because we really do care about that, and I think that will bring a different light on this situation. So now that I've done all that talking, I think I need to bring my guys. And number one is my man, Lance Conley. Lance is a guy who always comes strong, has great questions, and also has great solutions. So, Lance, welcome, man. Welcome to the show, man. You ready to do this thing?
Hey, thanks, sir. Yep, good evening. Yeah, definitely ready to do part 2. Definitely.
All right, man. Let's make it happen.
Last week.
Yeah, and without further ado, man, it's my guy, Terry Robinson. I mean, me and Terry talk just about every day, and we're really talking about this athlete transition stress and how it's affecting lives and how we can get this message out to the multitude. So what's going on, Terry?
Not too much, man. Happy Valentine's to you guys. And it's ironic that today is Valentine's Day and we're talking about women's issues.
Exactly. We got the women.
That is true.
Working on getting the women involved. So we hope that everybody is not booed up. And for all of you that don't know what booed up means, it means that they're not with their boyfriends or girlfriends, husbands or wives, or whatever. Okay? So, and if so, hey, why don't you guys call in together? I think it'll be a great show. So, you know what, Terry, I'm going to throw it back to you, man. I think you kind of started off last week, and I think you know where we left off. And I'm going to be ready to field calls. So listen, for anybody that wants to call in, the call-in number is 323-642-1579. That's 323-642-1579. Please call in. I'm going to be giving that number throughout the show. We really want to hear from you. So go ahead, Terry.
Well, you know, one of the good things about this, Eric and Lance, this show can be archived, so it's information. Whether you're on there today or not, you can always go back and listen. So that's the beauty of what we're doing and how this thing works. And our goal is always try to get some good information out there to help improve people's lives. So if you're out tonight, go back and check it out later. It'll be archived. We have all our shows archived. So, but getting back to the women, I just did I tried to do a little research and just try to have a better understanding of women in sports, period. And as I looked at information and I looked at numbers and stuff, it kind of mirrored integration. Integration of our society, how we integrate here as black people and white people. The whole process was almost mirrored it. And I looked at, back when Nixon was president, he signed a law, and it was Title IX, where, if you were an institution and you discriminated based on sex, you couldn't receive federal funding. Because before that, it was 1 in 27 women participating in sports. But and soon after that, those numbers went up. And even today, it's like 2 out of 5 women participate in sports. So it's incredible, the growth and how things changed after that law came into effect. Also, during that time, in the early 70s, like 72, I think it was probably just over 200,000 women participating in sports. Today, it's almost 3.2 million people participating in sports. And so when I see these figures, the first thing to go to my mind is, hey, these people, they probably didn't want to do it, but when they made that law and these people think 10 steps ahead of everybody else, they say, wow, this is a whole nother revenue stream. When you look at athletics and you say, well, first of all, we got all these men playing, and now if we bring in the women, we can potentially make more money. Same thing that happened with integration, but when we talk about integration, before integration, most black people had their own businesses, their own everything, because they couldn't go anywhere else. So we had to have our own stuff. But as soon as the integration happened, guess what happened? All that fell to the wayside. And now black people own very few businesses, considering how many businesses are operating in this country. And so with women athletics, they pretty much integrated, but they don't get the same resources, the same amount of money. You have your UConns who stand out. There's a few teams that stand out, but for the most part, a lot of them don't get the same respect that the other universities get. Even on a professional level, when you look at the NBA compared to the WNBA, you also look at the National Football League compared to the lingerie league. So these are the issues that we can discuss tonight, and I want to try to lay the groundwork on these issues so we can try to discuss some of these disparities, some of these issues that women face that men don't face. And bottom line, it's an economic pattern to all this behavior that we see and all these changes, because we look at it as it's a good thing. Well, it's a good thing, but who is it serving? Who does it serve? It continues to serve man first and the woman second. Then another thing, and then I'll let you guys get a chance to chime in. Also, what I was looking at, and I say now, when you look at sports, especially in particular women's sports, and it's one of the biggest things that stood out to me was a lot of these women struggle. Not all of them. A lot of them struggle with who they are as individuals, in my opinion. And because a lot of them grow up, a lot of them talk about, trying to be the man or the boy that the father never had, and it almost forces them to try to look a certain way, to act a certain way, and I think they get pushed in the corner sometimes, and you see that a lot in sports, and so I want to talk about that, and see how we evolve in terms of women in sports and athletics. So what do you guys think about some of these things that I'm bringing up?
Yeah, that's definitely a great foundation, because I think you're right. The Title IX, it seemed like they just started really initiating or enforcing that probably back in the early 2000s, because I remember there was kind of a backlash, especially in the men's programs, especially the wrestling programs and the secondary programs, because some of the men's programs were getting shut down because I believe they had to have scholarship, man for woman, and they're adding women's sports, which is great. Like you said, now you have 3.2 million women involved in sports academically across the country, which really gives them opportunities to not only go play sports, but to go on and get an education, and a free education at that, because a lot of them need it. It helps financially for sure. But then again, it's 3.2 million women across the country that are going to deal with the transition outside of spin. Again, I think we'll get into this a little bit deeper later on. But
and not to cut you off, Lance, but that $3.2 million includes high school athletes too, because it's 420,000 NCAA athletes, and 200,000 are women. So that's when it comes to college.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Those are staggering numbers, man. For us not to give the ladies their place, man, they hold a big position, on the sports fields and in the gyms. I mean, they're there. They're there.
And I think what you're saying too, Terry, is that they deserve the same opportunities and the same rights in sports too, because I think, even talking about, they've always talked about wanting to pay players, especially in the primary sports like football and basketball and the male sports. But one of the hang-ups to that is, well, if we pay the football players or the basketball players, that means we also have to pay everybody else. And I think that's one of the big hang-ups with actually paying players, because one of the things with women's sports is they don't produce the revenues, but again, it produces opportunities for women, because colleges are supposed to be about academics first, sports second, and I think Title IX was a good thing, because I think anytime people get a fair opportunity or the equal opportunity, I think it's always good. So that's kind of my view on Title IX.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is they have to enforce these rules. And we live in an age of high-powered attorneys, and they can find loopholes in just about everything. And so how do we hold people accountable? How do we know if people are getting what they're supposed to be getting? A lot of times we don't. They don't have the same resources, facilities sometimes as the men, and like you said, it's all based on revenues. You have more people attending male athletes games than women at this point, and so that's the excuse.
Yeah, but you know what, though, guys, the thing that I'm noticing, and with my involvement with sports, man, I've dealt with, like Terry, I'm just gonna take it here, because this is what I know. The Marshall High School, the big-time high schools that were big for women's basketball back in Chicago, man, they had a following. It was unbelievable. You know what I mean? And it's because, one thing is because, of course, these young ladies, their families were involved. But then number two, man, those women provided, not only great entertainment, just like the men do but you can also see they put their sweat and blood and everything into it, just like the males. So remember now what we're talking about, the sex scandals that are on the college campus. So now when we go over to that side of it, and then we put the sports piece in, you got to realize that when these things go on these campuses, right, it's not only the young women and the young men involved in those sexual acts, but then when this type of stuff is going on, it's affecting every sport on the campus. So now women are being affected by some of these crazy things that's going on, you know what I mean, these different scandals and stuff like that, and we don't even think about what they're thinking about it, what they have to say about it, or anything else. What usually happens is someone runs in with the mop and bucket, tries to clean it all up, and then just sweep it under the rug, not even realizing the psychological effect or anything else that it has, not only on the women involved in this thing, but also the other people the other women that are participating in sport. You understand what I mean? I mean, a lot of times we do treat women in these cases as the second-class citizens, which is very wrong. You know what I mean? And the statistics prove it, see, that they are just as important, and at times even more important, because a lot of times you don't see problems within the women's, within the women's sport. Now, with the exception of UConn basketball, Tennessee basketball, South Carolina, Duke, types of things, those are probably pretty big revenue generators for those schools. But, I mean, I think one of the major reasons is because we don't give the women their respect, because we think they're bringing in the big dollar. So if something bad happens, it happens in that men's sport, but we're not thinking about how it's affecting anybody else. And by the way, everyone, that's why we're dealing with this. And of course, we don't have these women on yet. They will call in. I promise. I promise you, they'll call in. I promise you. People have told me they're calling in. Believe me. Just hang on. They're going to call. But you gotta understand what I'm saying. I mean, am I making sense?
Yeah, because I think women's sports still has its purest form. I think when you talk about the money, if you follow the money, it's at least the corruption. And I think that's where you have men's sports primarily, a lot of the men's sports where you do have corruption. I mean, look at what John Calipari makes compared to probably the Kentucky female basketball coach.
Right.
Look at the facilities for the Kentucky men's basketball program versus the women's probably facilities. And so it's to me, it's about money and power, and then it creates corruption, which a lot of these adults, coaches, administrators participate and sweep under the rug, and which creates a lot of issues. And when you talk about safety, we talked about the issues last week, and you said what should happen to Baylor. I don't think they should have got the death penalty, but I think ball coach should never coach again. The assistants that are aware of it should never coach. I mean, it's their responsibility to make sure campus is safe. And I think anything, whether it's college or our institutions, politics, if you follow the money, you have corruption right behind it. And that's the good thing about women's sports. It's its purest form. You don't have that corruption. I mean, how often do you hear about women programs being put on probation?
Wow, that's a great point. And those administrators should get the death penalty, not the players.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So why is that?
A lot of that stuff. Look, man, you can't look, man. Terry and I talked about this last week. Terry and I have been on college visits. We'll leave it at that. Look, we'll leave it right there. Let your mind run free with what happened on these visits and stuff like that. We've been there, done that, so we're not going to sit here and act like we're so innocent either. So we understand what happened during these visits. So, Lance, you bring up a very good point about the purity, right, of women's basketball or women's lacrosse or any of these sports. Most times when girls are going on campus, they're really not trying to go. I mean, man, okay, yeah, they may look at, oh, man, that's a cute guy, whatever, but they're really going there for that sport they're going for, and, I mean, yeah, to have fun in college, but then also their education. So there's a purity even there. While I know when I went on my visit, after all the things I heard from all my boys and all the people that have went before me, Terry, please correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't just looking at, oh, that's a good school. You know what I'm saying? They brought me on campus at Drake University doing Drake Relays. For those of you that don't know what Drake Relays is, it's probably the biggest party in Iowa, in really in the Midwest as far as the track and field thing goes. So every school from all over the country was there. LSU, UCLA, Penn State, every school in the country was there. All the Greeks were there. Every type of woman you could think of was there. All those things were there. So why did they bring Eric Harrison on campus? Because we want him as a basketball player, so we know that he's going to take up the distraction. When I saw women come on campus, they were coming on campus at any time. A lot of times they were looking at the dorms. They were looking at a lot of things that, I really didn't care about. I didn't care. I mean, I'm not even going to lie. Even the academic piece, I cared some, but not that much. I really did. My mom and dad wasn't involved in my recruiting. So, hey, man, I was looking to have a good time. You know what I'm saying? I was looking for the next level. Hey, I'm going to be on my own. I'm going to do my own thing. So, Lance, you bring up a great point about purity, man. It's just, the whole perspective of the women's perspective on the sport itself,
Yeah. Because, and just think about, because a lot of times when athletes, especially male athletes, they're choosing the school, obviously, for the sport and with the hope of making it to the next level, because it's everybody's dream. And obviously, the women have the opportunity to go on to the WNBA or, maybe professional track and field and different things like that. But, it's a little bit different than the male perspective and, why we choose a school or why we go to school. And really, the experience that we have at the school. I think, most of the time, and I can't speak for them. That's why it would be nice to have some callers come in. But, I think when women choose a school, it isn't necessarily to, get to the next level. And, women and men are built different. We see the world different. And we definitely have different perspectives. And, it's just interesting. And, I think the sports world primarily, whether we like it or not, centers around, male sports. Because that's where the money's at. And as long as you have money, you're going to, it's going to be promoted. It's going to be on Sports Center. I mean, if you watch Sports Center, how often do you see? I mean, most people probably don't even know how many games UConn has won. Was it almost 100 games that they won in a row? And look at the coverage that gets compared to everything else. Just because it doesn't, have the money involved in it like other stuff does. So.
Yeah, and you find these pockets, and I would consider them to be one of those pockets of institutions where they are generating revenue, but that's just one school. They're going to sell out, and every young lady want to go to either UConn or Tennessee or Louisville. You can name them. You can, on one hand, and just like in Iowa when I first got there, 6-on-6 basketball was huge. I mean, when you go to Iowa, women's basketball is bigger than male's basketball. I mean, the following, I had never seen anything like that in my life. And, of course, they went to 5-on-5. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because they packed the facility. And when they had 6-on-6, everybody went to Des Moines to go watch the women play basketball. And I think once they kind of weird, so. But, yeah, go ahead, Jerry. Sorry about that.
But it was a tradition. It was a tradition. It was something different. It was theirs. And that whole state rallied around 6-on-6 basketball. So women basketball has a huge tradition back in Iowa. And they still do, like I said, not as much, but they still do, because one of Eric and our teammates, Sam Powell, he coaches women's basketball, and he's won a championship, and he's had some great teams. And I'm telling you, they were packing the gym so much they switched the times. They had the girls play second and the boys play first, when it used to be the opposite. They had the women play first and the boys play second, so that they can catch that bigger crowd on the other end. But they switched the times around when they were winning.
Really?
And I had never seen that. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't either.
Yeah.
So then I want to pose a question. You talked about the purity of the sport and how it seems like women's sports has more purity. Do you honestly think that the high-level programs, the Tennessee, the Baylor's, wow, Baylor's name is coming up all over the place, the Baylor's, who has a great women's basketball program, is there any improprieties going on? This is hearsay, everyone, NCAA, whoever's listening. This is all hearsay. This is all speculation. We don't know anything. But the thing about it is this, do you think there's improprieties going on at these high-level schools or even at these high schools that are producing these great players that are having all this success? Do you think so, guys?
That's a good question.
I think eventually, that's a great question, because the way I see it is eventually there will be, because all those coaches love to win. In order to win and compete, you have to have the best players. And so if you're going up against a UConn, Tennessee, I think Notre Dame, and you want to get the best players, can you out-recruit Connecticut? I mean, I think it'd be hard to do. So I think that's where it becomes tempting for some of these coaches. Man, in order for me to be on top, in order for me to be the best, like we said, everybody has a competitive nature that's built in, is I can see it coming. eventually, because I think it's starting to get more money into the sport. You know what I mean? So it's just evolving. I think anything that evolves, and that everything that, or any coach that wants to win, I think eventually that's what it creates, because it only takes one coach to start, you know, doing a little thing on the side, and another coach go, man, in order to compete against that, I got to do a little bit better. I mean, go down to the SEC. They'll teach you how to do it.
That was a jab. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was already happening. I really wouldn't be, you know, because some of those coaches and people that are in charge are maybe saying, look, nobody's watching us, you know, like they're watching the boys, so they can get away with something much easier than the men's program, in my opinion, because we just don't even think about it. That's as much as I like sports and love sports, I never thought about that. It never even occurred to me to even think that. And why is that?
It just came to me just now, because I'm like, you know, I mean, okay, you current women, so every girl in America who's in high school wants to go there. But how does, like, for instance, South Carolina guys, they kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, how did they build their program? What went on? You see what I'm saying? So these are all things that we have to think about. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. That was just kind of top of mind. But man, go ahead, Lance. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Just to add to that, Eric, too, I think another thing that we have to recognize too is, you know, women's basketball is involved greatly too, and there's a lot more players out there. I mean, you know, you watch a women's basketball game, man, they can get up and down the court. The only thing that's different in watching them play is they just don't play above the rim. You know, I mean, they're sometimes better shooters. I mean, they can shoot the heck, and definitely better free throw shooters.
Right.
Right.
You're in line. Well, anyway, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and pay a couple of bills right now. We're gonna play a commercial right now, and we are expecting some calls here right after this commercial break. So stay tuned, because we're gonna have some women chime in and join us in this conversation. Great conversation. So we'll see you guys in a moment.
Sports is a common denominator in the lives of people everywhere. Our celebration of sports creates an environment that gives athletes an amazing experience that enhances their lives. Athletes work long and hard to be the best at that thing that gives them so much elation. But what happens after the athlete is done? When a circumstance comes up and they're no longer able to play that sport? Whether it's the high school athlete who doesn't get that scholarship to go to the next level, or the college athlete that doesn't get picked in the draft, or even the professional athlete who now has to retire and find something else to do day to day. Many athletes struggle with this transition from competition to regular everyday life. This transition causes trauma, and that trauma often leads to depression, anxiety, anger, and even health issues. Author Terry Robinson noticed this problem and researched it and came up with the book, Athlete Transition Stress. This book deals with the subconscious programming and conditioning that goes on in an athlete's mind while participating in a sport. So if you or anyone you know are dealing with these issues related to transitioning from a sport, pick up the book, Athlete Transition Stress, and share your story in our global community online at www.letgroup1.com. Athlete Transition Stress is available on Amazon.com and on the LET Group website at www.letgroup1.com.
Well, everyone, this is the book that started it all. After this is a brainchild of my brother Terry Robinson. He really researched this malady because he saw it in his own life. He saw that he was having problems. He saw that he was dealing with things that he didn't understand as far as him not playing the sport anymore. So he researched it, came up with athlete transition stress, and then he wrote the book on it. And I would guarantee that if you play the sport, whether you're a woman or a man, and you are dealing with things that you may not understand, this book will help you. Also, this book will help you with any type of transition stress, by the way. I'd like to throw that in. So go out, get the book. Go to www.letgroup1.com. Go to our website. Great stuff out there, and you can get the book there as well. So now we're going to jump back into this conversation, man. Spirited conversation. We kind of got off into, women's sports, basketball, those types of things. But now we're going to kind of take it back to what we were talking about last week, which is kind of the sex scandals on these college campuses and what's going on. And again, like I said earlier, we kind of approached everything from the man's standpoint. We came from, the psychological thought process of a young boy going into college, some of the things that he dealt with, and how some of these things, kind of happened to him over time. We are not saying that this young man or these young men are victims by any means. We are saying that if they did do something wrong, they should be punished. Anybody that does anything wrong should be punished. But also, if there's a punishment, there needs to be a rehabilitation and even a finding out, and thinking of why they did it as well. But one thing that we noticed last week is we did not talk about the women and their perspective, the women who may be involved in these situations, the women who may have even put out there that these things were happening to them. We really didn't talk about that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about, maybe some of the mental mindsets of what some women may have had, and we're going to have probably some calls come in as well. Not probably, we will. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. So, Terry, I'm going to toss it back to you, and have at it, man.
Yeah, I know we talked about these males and, being accountable for their actions. But one thing I want to add is these adults that bring these young males to these campuses need to be held accountable too. Because you bring a child, to me, these young men are not, they considered adults, they're really not. And they need somebody to mentor them and help them through this process. Obviously, I have a daughter, and when you have a daughter, you see things a whole lot different than you did before. In most cases, I know I do. And so when I think about, and she's still a baby, but I can only imagine by the time she gets of age and starts college or even high school, I want to be right there with her, right there with her, because I know how young males think. And a lot of it is physiology. It's growth, where they are in terms of their growth from a physiology standpoint and physical standpoint. And so if you don't have nobody talking to you, a man that you can trust talking to you about this and how to treat women and how to even treat yourself, and you out there, you're lost. And you're doing things and getting involved in things that you have no clue that would eventually get you caught up as well as the young female and vice versa. And so there's a lot of things that take place on college campuses, because you don't have the supervision, because when we turn 18, we expect for you to be able to handle yourself a certain way. But what I always tell people, just because you're 18 or 21 or 41, you can still be behind emotionally. And I think when these issues happen, we need to do a better job of backtracking with these young men and seeing where they are psychologically. And most of them have arrested development. And I'm not making excuses for them. But based on the decisions they make, it's obvious to me that there is a lack of development there because of decisions that we make. And a lot of times we're looking at these people for face value. And it goes back to and also, and I don't want to let the young ladies off the hook either, because sometimes they're behind too because of whatever the struggles that they've had or that they may be going through. And so they find themselves in a situation that they probably wouldn't be in if they would be up to speed, so to speak, emotionally. And so when you put both of these things together and you put them on a college campus, a lot of times it's a recipe for something like some of these tragedies to happen. And that's not making excuses, but it's just a reality.
Yes, a powder keg.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we have last. Let me interrupt you just a second. We have a caller on the line.
Oh, cool.
I don't want them to hold anything any longer. I want them to go ahead and kind of chime in. So hold on. Let me bring the call in. Hi, caller.
Good evening.
How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm doing wonderful.
Hey, listen, you notice how all the guys' voices change? Oh, hi. How are you? You know, we talking about rough and stuff. You know, when you get on the line, you get all, nice and mannerable. Caller, could you introduce yourself, please? And you can also begin to make your point, please.
Sure. My name is Cindy. I'm from Manchester. And I follow your show regularly, so thank you for doing what you do and bringing these issues to light. I also appreciate that you're putting a spin on it and addressing some of the female perspectives, not only female athletes and how some of the disparities affect them, but some of the female victims, which, to Terry's earlier comment, the young men have an arrested development, and then as well some of the females that come in to college with arrested development put themselves in bad situations. But also another perspective is the female that comes in pretty prepared as well as she can at 18, but then development is arrested because of the victimization that she incurred in some of these tragic events. And then further being victimized by the systems in place that don't validate what happened to her, brushing the situation under the rug, not holding the young man or the programs responsible. So now you have someone who's victimized and further invalidated. So you re-victimize the victim. And you see this a lot as well, ex-law enforcement, you see it in policing, where the justice system will re-victimize the victim. And so kind of that's one of the spins that you guys hadn't talked a lot about, but and how that can actually stunt a young woman's development for years and decades to come.
Yeah, that's a great point, caller, because, one of the things you hear, and, I'll let you expand a little bit more, but when a victim does come forward, especially at one of these major universities, basketball or football, a lot of times they have to drop out, a lot of times they get harassed, and they continue to be re-victimized. Like you say, I think, they had a situation down in Florida State with Jameis Winston, with a particular female. And so it happens over and over, and it seems like everybody's trying to protect the player or the institution versus really helping the person that actually had to go through the situation, which is a great point.
Right.
That's why we need that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say that's why we needed that female's perspective, because you add value to what we're talking about. I mean, how can there be any value if it's only one-sided? We can do our best, but it can only come from a female. That's the reality of it. So we definitely appreciate your perspective.
Thank you. Just so multifaceted.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, you said you brought up the police force or whatever. Do you have a background in law enforcement?
I do. I'm retired Bloomfield, Connecticut police. So.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately,
so you were in the field predominantly. Oh, man.
Okay. Yes, definitely in the field. A number of aspects of policing, from detective division, work with the youth, firearms. So I've kind of dealt with all aspects of policing, not just patrol as a first responder, but I've had the experience of going a little deeper and responding to criminal situations, and a lot of times, unfortunately, involving the victimization of elderly or the youth in the high school, sometimes, unfortunately, sexual assault, things of that nature. So, we can translate a lot of the things we're talking about, victimization of the victims, the cover-ups that go on, depending on who the families are that are involved, the school district's reputation. It just, these issues translate into so many different aspects of society where we have to kind of look at the victim. And until we look at this from a holistic approach and we start to value these people more than appearances, more than money, more than profit, we're going to continue the same behaviors over and over again as a society.
Great point.
Wow. Yeah, because these academic institutions, they're just like small, microcosms of society. It's the same thing going on in our society on these campuses, And your perspective, I'm sure, it matches up with exactly what we want to say, But obviously, I haven't been in that particular field, and I'm sure you've seen the worst of the worst working in that field. And some of these same things happen on these college campuses. They happen in society, and we just assume these are college kids. How could these things happen? Well, these kids come from the same society, and we got a lot of work to do. You have these people that have been traumatized on these college campuses, looking nice and neat on the outside, but on the inside, a total mess. And when we don't reach them, it ends up spilling over and spilling out.
Right.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point about not having that parental support or, whomever responsible adults that were in their lives, not having them readily accessible, and sometimes not wanting to reach out on campus or even reach back home to whomever was their support system because I'm supposed to be 18, I'm supposed to have it figured out, or 19 or 20, feeling embarrassed to reach back out and ask questions when they have questions or when they have doubt over themselves or, have made a bad decision, occasion and some support so that those negative behaviors or bad decisions don't escalate in any ways that they have.
And you know what, guys? The other thing with this that we have to bring in, and Terry, I know, and Lance, you can make this connection as well. Everything's a transition again. You know what I mean? So think about it. You had these things happen. You had these traumatic experiences. This is even on a higher level, but it's a high-level traumatic experience that just happened. So now you're in transition mode. You're transitioning into a place where you don't know what to think. You don't know what to do. Now you've got all these things coming at you. You don't know how to react. You know what I mean? You don't know what to do. And oftentimes, as Cindy said, with the re-victimization and all of these different things, it seems as though the men athletes that commit these crimes or commit these improprieties are put on this special program to get better, while sometimes we hear nothing about the young ladies. We don't know. So I haven't gotten so deep into these situations that I know what's going on with the young ladies. But how are they being put back into society on campus? You know what I mean? How are they being transitioned back into society to try to have what would be considered a normal life? With that scar on their lives, with that thing on their lives. And a lot of times, you guys know this, athletes, they just keep going on like nothing really happened because the administration, the programs, and everybody else takes this stuff and just, like we said before, sweeps it under the rug. Like there's no, okay, yeah, you did it, we're going to slap you on the hand, but you go out there and keep winning this game. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
Cindy brings up some great points and some very valid points, and these are the things that athletes don't want to talk about, college campuses don't want to talk about, college programs don't want to talk about, athletic directors don't want to talk about, universities don't want to talk about. And, that's a part of kind of why we're bringing this out because, again, this is something that's affecting our youth, affecting sports. And, again, it's just the transition itself. There's a lot of people out there that are hurt because of these types of things.
Well, every time we speak of transition, most people when they hear the word transition, they're usually thinking a physical transition. I move you from one space to another. Like some kid get victimized. They say, well, we'll put you on a different campus and we'll continue to pay your tuition, or we'll sit you over here or whatever. No, we're talking about a transition mentally, emotionally. That's where we have to be focused. Because if you don't, if you're stuck there, I mean, you're not going to be healthy. From a mental standpoint, if you're not healthy mentally, eventually it becomes physical health. And now, you went somewhere, trying to better yourself, and now you made your situation, worse, so to speak. And sometimes not even you haven't, but the situation that occurred. And these people that are supposed to be supporting us, they continue moving on with their lives.
And that's a great point, because Terry, and I think you talk about this in the book, because once you stay stuck and emotionally you can't get through that transition, that's where depression, anger, the whole grief cycle kind of takes place. And obviously people have to go through it, but so many people stay stuck in that anger, depression. And I think that's where you talk about people's health, and you hear about these young athletes like Fab Mello. I think someone just died in their sleep last week, in his early 30s or something like that. And then you hear about these other players just, 40s, late 40s, about our age. And I'm like, man, that is just crazy to think about, that these athletes, that people that are in great shape physically, but mentally, it has such an impact on, our lives and, internally what's going on. And I think you talked a little bit about that last week. I mean, on the outside, you can look like you're in great physical condition, but if you're mentally in bad condition, it eats at you, and eventually it'll get you.
Right. Yeah. It's a saying. It says disease is disharmony. It is an expression of our internal disharmony. That's what disease is.
Wow.
It's internal. It's an expression of it. So if anybody comes down with a disease, you don't say, well, there's something going on with you. But the reality of it is it's something internally that you're struggling with. And I say that because I've been there. I don't say that, because I've seen somebody else going through that, because that's a hard thing for somebody to accept. But it's the truth. And I have to accept that. When you say, well, you got this disease with type 2 diabetes, whatever it is, it's like, what? How? And that's because you're still struggling with something internally. You need to figure that out. Cancer, it's internal. It's internal. Yeah. But most people will try to get you to believe that it's the food that you're eating or it's the water that you're drinking, whatever. Those things can have an impact, but I think it starts with the mental. It's mental, and we don't deal with our mental health.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Eric.
But see, wow, and now this is something that I just thought of just now. But combining what Cindy's talking about, combining with everything that you guys are talking about, think about the athletes that committed these crimes, that know they did this, right? They know they did. So it got swept under the rug. They went through their college career. They did their thing. Don't you know that if they never had to answer for something that they did, don't you know that that's on them as well? So think about the pressure that's going to put on them. Number one, spiritually, which everybody has their own spiritual beliefs, so we're not going to go deep into that. But then in the soul realm, then it's going to get, on your mind. And then if it's on your mind, guess what it's going to do then? Your body. So now you've got a combination of these bad things that you've done, right? And now you think back to the young lady or whoever was affected by it. You think back like, oh, my God. You know what I'm saying? Because everyone has a decent bone somewhere. And it all comes back. So now all of this pressure is like on the ex-athlete as well. Because no one ever really dealt with the root of the problem, which is the thing they did. You see what I'm saying? The why they did it. And then there was really at times no punishment. then on the flip side, with the women, no one ever helps them. No one really deals with it with them. Hey, you're going to be okay. You're going to punish them. Here's this. Some receive payoffs. Some are moved to another university. So now you've created this rift in these people's lives because they never really dealt with this stuff. And Terry, to go back to what you said, if you don't deal with this stuff, then now it's going to manifest in your body in the physical, some way, shape, or form, some type of dis-ease because there is this.
Yeah. It's this lady named Joanne Peterson. She came up with a quote. She said, "We experience life through our bodies. If we are not able to articulate our life experience, our bodies will speak what our minds and our mouths cannot."
Wow.
So, we live life through our bodies. And if we can't articulate what's going on, our bodies will do it for us. And that's where disease comes from. And that's why you hear people saying disease or dis-ease, because it's the same thing. And people don't want to believe that. It is, though. Dis-ease is disease because we live our lives through our bodies. And that's why it's good that we have a forum where we can talk about things and get things out that we need to get out. Because if you don't get those things out, what happens to this stuff that you holding on to? I mean, it's not rocket science. It has to go somewhere. It's energy, and it's not good energy.
And that's why people need this book, is because I think so many, especially males, because we have a habit of feeling like, we don't express ourselves the best all the time, and we feel like we can handle anything. But we're primarily the ones that probably need this book because we need to be able to get these things out so we don't get physically ill or we don't have those diseases that you speak of.
Right, but do you see the pendulum changing where women are becoming similar to men, where they don't really express themselves either? They've had to put on a hard hat, go to work, do all these kind of things. They're taking on that personality. They don't do it as much as they used to.
Right.
Cindy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would so definitely agree with that. And it's interesting. I was just on LinkedIn today and shared an article about women trying to climb the corporate ladder and how to not come off as aggressive when they're actually simply being assertive, but the perceptions that surround them and how they have to be to navigate, the climb up the corporate ladder. And so the stresses that come along with that and wanting to be perceived as strong and knowledgeable, but not aggressive, lacking empathy, because you can't be too hard, but you can't be too soft. And the women have to walk a finer line because, number one, inherently we're boxed out of a lot of those opportunities, and that was what the article was saying. It actually stated that studies have shown, they project that it's probably going to be at least another 100 years before we reach pay equity and things of that nature for women in the corporate arena. But for now, the stress and pressure on the women in that arena and trying to have work-life balance, family, responsibilities, and still be that capable leader, and the stress that is brought on by that and not being misperceived as weak is such a challenge. And a lot of women, even navigating sports, they have that same challenge. They still have to be sisters, daughters, students. You talked about early in the first half about some of the confusion that these young ladies go through and just trying to hold themselves together and just be who they are and be successful without all the misperceptions that come with being who they are as an athlete or, for in this example, trying to climb the ladder without being perceived as being too masculine or aggressive.
Yeah. And that was a question I was going to have for you, colleague. That's interesting because when you are a women athlete, how do other women perceive that, the women athlete? Are they hard on them? Do they feel like they're too masculine? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, wow.
Right. I personally will say I never made those judgments. I looked at them like, my God, they're actually amazing. I started off trying to run track like I was going to do something at UConn, and I walked off and said, this is for the birds. So I had nothing but respect for them. But there was a perception of some of the athletes, if they were into more of the, for example, you had the track team, you had the sprinters, but then you had, the shot putter or something like that. And, of course, these women are of a thicker, more sizable stature. And so people kind of looked at them with the side eye and made judgments sometimes. You know what I mean? And it just was unfounded so many times. But just the judgments were ridiculous. And that as well just kind of affected these girls in their daily walk through school and just knowing the side comments, the side eye, how people are looking at them and perceiving them. They're just there maybe on scholarship, maybe walk-ons, just trying to get an education and then having to deal with that other aspect of being in school and being an athlete.
You know who went through that? I remember I was in the Bahamas. This was probably 15, 20 years ago. And I was talking to this tennis coach, a friend of mine. We were talking to tennis coach, and he was talking about Venus and Serena. And he was like, "Oh, Serena, it was from Bahamas." He was like, "She'll never make it. She's too big. She's too big." And when you were talking about that, it made me think of that. And now look at her. She's probably one of the best women athletes in tennis we've ever had. I shouldn't say she is. And I think that's what drove her, because people were saying, "Oh, look how she's built," and da 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 da. And she took that as fuel, and it motivated her. And look at her; she's still playing, almost 40 years old, winning championships. So I think you're right. We do judge, based on appearance. And when you sit down and get to know somebody, I mean, because that's what it's really about. Then you can gain a better perspective of yourself, not necessarily that other individual, but yourself. And Serena Williams is a prime example.
Oh, yeah. Well, but for the young lady just coming out of their home situation, those judgments can be so painful, so damning, so detrimental. They're out there, they're kind of by themselves, and just the impact to their self-esteem, who they believe they are, while they haven't even probably figured that out yet. They're still in a developmental phase of who they really are. It's just so unfortunate to continue to perpetuate those type of things and give these ladies another cross to bear, for lack of a better term.
Wow.
Okay, guys, we got about 3 minutes left in the show, so let's get some closing statements. Cindy, you might as well stay on now. I mean, man, you might wind up being a regular now. Everybody's probably gonna call.
Yeah.
So we gonna.
We really appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, we're gonna have to probably come up with some salary for you, because you probably might wind up being a regular if you don't watch it. But Terry, go ahead, man. Give me some of your closing thoughts, brother.
Well, it's Valentine's Day, and we hopefully we shed some light for the women. Try to hold them up, because, like you said, the three of us, we recognize the struggle, but we're trying to get other people to recognize their struggle too. So we definitely appreciate you, Cindy, coming on and spending some time with us, giving us a different picture, a different insight, because it definitely helps, and we want to continue it. So thank you.
Thank
you. Go ahead, Lance.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. Yeah, I would definitely like to thank Cindy for coming in. That your perspective was very helpful, and we would definitely like to have you come back because your insight is appreciated. But getting back to the issue, I just want to make the final point is I feel like the issue is with the institutions, the coaching staff. I feel like they recruit these players since they're 10th grade in high school. They know them for 3 or 4 years, and they know what kind of characters they're bringing into these schools. And then you have, on the other hand, you have mothers, fathers bringing their daughters to that same campus, and the coach can decide whether or not they want to offer that young man a scholarship to participate. But what they do is they choose their own personal gain, the university's gain, and a lot of times, sometimes they bring in bad people to these college campuses. And to me, that's where it starts. So that's my final point. Thank you.
Well, hey, everybody. Thank you, man. Cindy, we want to extend a huge thank you from our show to you. You gave up time on your Valentine's Day to be with us. So thank you very much. Guys, thank you for a great show. And, hey, tune in next week because we're going to have another topic that will be just as powerful, and hopefully we'll continue to be able to help you guys. So until then, we'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us on the Life's Twist Show. When you have a chance, please check out our website at www.letgroup1.com and see all of the things that we'll be doing over the next several weeks. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
I think that would be a little fairly constrained, so I work from home, so you know.
Did you hear that, T? Yeah, you know what? That might be on the recording.
Welcome to Staples.
Staples guy, I just got to town and I need a presentation printed for a big meeting tomorrow.
Well, Staples has everything you need to print, scan, and fax.
Great. Oh, just got a text. The home office made changes to the presentation.
No problem. You can access your files from a USB, email, or the cloud.
And the meeting isn't tomorrow, now it's today.
Our machines are self-service, so there's no waiting.
And it's not here. Now it's in Ebensburg.
I hear it's lovely this time of year.
Print, scan, fax, and copy at Staples. Your office away from home. 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 Office away from home.